Hola class, how we doing? It's Dr. Dano here. First, apologies all around. I know this is Saturday when I'm recording this, and I normally do this on Thursdays. To say that I had a crazy week would be an understatement. On Thursday, I'm happy to say that I was in Manhattan. I'm on the social media advisory board for the 2014 Super Bowl, and we had our huge kickoff meeting. 75 people there from the NFL, the three agencies, Yammer, pretty much every New York agency you can think of. If you're a football fan, you're going to have to be in Manhattan, you know, those 2, 3, 4 days before the Super Bowl. 34th Street up through Times Square is going to be completely blocked off for an entire amazing fan experience, including a toboggan ride. So write that one down. But what we're going to do today is I really appreciate you spending the time going through the last video. That was the first time I'd ever tried to do that. It was long. I understand it was long. So what I'm going to do today is I'm actually going to record 2 videos. The first one is I'm just going to go through the articles and show you where my head's at with these. And then the second video is I'm going to answer all your questions. So if we think about where we were last week, we started off with market orientation. And we have incredibly strong, the 3 elements to market orientation, incredibly strong external orientation towards customers, incredibly strong external orientation towards competitors, and then the hardest of them all, that inter-firm communication where everybody's on the same page. Think about it like a flat organization. Firms that are market-oriented tend to do well. Firms that are not market-oriented, that are stuck in silos, that spend most of their energies looking inward, internal politics, internal battles, fiefdoms, functional silos, all bad. And then our other articles supported that market orientation philosophy. We had 2 articles that dealt mainly with a learning organization, communities of practice. This is that inter-firm component. And then finally we had 2 blogging ones, you know, to have a little Web 2.0 aspect to the class. And these ones you could see, you know, these were learning organizations as well. So we moved into our second module where we're looking at satisfaction and loyalty. I actually was teaching this to my undergrads this week. This is my undergrad's sales class, and this slide popped up. And to frame this week's lecture, let's take a look at these boxes here. And if we see here, this is really the time period post-World War II. I would say this is the 50s to the early 70s, where we were basically manufacturing, stack it high, let it fly, just get the stuff into the retailers. There really wasn't that many companies out there. There wasn't really that many choices out there. So really the manufacturers had all the power, and guess what? Whatever was in the stores sold. This was the time period of 2 cars on every garage. And because of post-World War II, really there wasn't really all that much competition out there, both in the U.S. and remember the rest of the world was rebuilding itself. By the time we got into the late 70s and in the 80s, we started to see more competition. We started to see competition from Japan, from Germany, from Europe, you know, and then all of a sudden, and then of course more domestic competition, more firms, you know, got stronger and bigger. So in here we were targeting particular market segments, right? And then what happened was we had this shift, and this went up through the the mid to late 70s through the mid to late 80s. During the mid to late 80s, if you recall back, maybe some of your MBA courses talked about the quality movement, total quality management. This took off in the 80s and carried itself all the way through into the 90s. And this is where this area here, this customer marketing, and this is when, during the TQM time period, total quality management, where these articles came from, or at least the first one anyway. You know, when we're starting to talk about, oh, we need to start thinking about satisfaction levels from our customers, you know. And then this was the early 80s through the 80s, but towards the end of the 80s and in the early the 90s, we start seeing a problem with the satisfaction, and we shift into loyalty in the mid-90s through the 90s and into the early 2000s. As soon as we started going full bore Web 2.0 post 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004, this is when we really started to get to the one-to-one marketing where I think we're all headed. You know, where we have the Netflix of the world, where we have the Amazons of the world, and they're not targeting individual customer bases, they're targeting individuals. Okay? So our first article here is Why Satisfies Customers Defect. It's a fantastic article. A little more light here. You know. But you see here on page 88, and you see the reference on page 91 in the top left-hand corner. This one was 1995. The first article that these guys started writing with was 1990, and you see the title of that, Zero Defection, Quality Comes to Services. Well, if you were looking at quality and you were looking at services, you of course were looking at satisfaction. So this article, this is a satisfaction article, and we're talking about why satisfies customers defect. And we had some interesting things come up in here. You know, the first concept that we have here on page 90 is the concept of forced loyalty or forced satisfaction, meaning that just because we may have customers buying because they are forced or have no other choice. Think of the cable companies. Think of using Newark. Do you really want to use Continental? Well, maybe you don't want to use Continental, but it's half the flights coming in and out of Newark are Continental. And maybe all your frequent flyer miles are with Continental. So you're kind of forced to, you know, the advantages of staying with are better than not, you know. Now, I happen to like my iPhone, but it just so happens that I've had AT&T for so long that I'm grandfathered into unlimited data. I probably will buy the new iPhone sometime later this fall. But I still want to stay with AT&T because I have unlimited data. And it's sort of a forced loyalty. I like that concept. It's a good one for your nugget journals. So we see this satisfaction-loyalty relationship on the bottom of page 91. And we see how local telephone is completely forced. Airlines has some forcing. Hospital has. But if we get to the bottom half of this, there's less forcing. Personal computers, the consumer has more choice. Automobiles, the consumer has more choice. We could talk about soft drinks, and we'd be down here even further. Now, the other awesome thing that I wanted to bring up in this article is the apostles and the terrorists and the loyalty typology. I like this idea. That you have some consumers that are completely loyal, that they do pro-social behavior. They're an apostle for the brand, right? And then we have defectors or terrorists and how they're lower or medium or they have lower loyalty. And then we have mercenaries and we have hostages. That's that forced behavior. I mean, one of the key points of this article is I want you to make sure you think about a satisfaction loyalty typology. All the way from apostles to all the way to terrorists, and then you have the forced loyalty in the middle somewhere here. You call them hostages, I guess. You know. The other thing that I want you to take a peek at, if you look at the second to the last page of this article, and this comes through in the next article too, I might say. Loyalty is a measure of past behavior. You know, one of the problems that we're going to see very soon, you know, leading into our next article, is they did 10 years of satisfaction studies, and we kept trying to see why the satisfaction scores weren't linked stronger to either customer loyalty or revenue growth. Well, there's two reasons. Reason number one is satisfaction is a measure of past behavior. Hey, Dan, how you doing? You went to this restaurant. How satisfied were you? Well, yeah, on a scale of 1 to 5, I'll give it a 4.5. I was fairly satisfied with this trip. At no point in those satisfaction measures do they ask you about future behavior. They're only asking you about past behavior. So the way I want you to write it down in your journals is satisfaction can only get you so far. You learn something about what happens in the past, but that's basically it. You know, projecting what happened in the past towards the future, you know, you're one deviation away from where you wanted to be in the measurement. You know, there's more possibility for error projecting from the past forward. And we're going to see that in the second thing. The second article. The other thing is how to decide what action to take. You know, on a 5-point scale, you notice how 1, 2, and 3 are dissatisfied, 3 and 4 are neutral, 4 and 5 are satisfied. Satisfaction scores are not evenly distributed. So sorry, I can't draw all that well. If we look at this is an even distribution with 50% of the data on one side and 50% of the data or responses on the other side. So if there was 100 responses, you would expect some mean in the middle. But satisfaction scores don't look like that. You know, satisfaction scores, you know, you'd be able to plot them across evenly this nice, beautiful bell curve. But satisfaction scores are not a bell curve. You know, if this was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a 5-point scale with 3 in the middle, 3 is the average where most of the responses would be. However, this is what a satisfaction curve looks like. It's skewed, where there's hardly ever any 1 and 2s. There's always lots of 3s, 4s, and 5s. And the middle tends to be somewhere between 4 and 5. So what happens is if someone says, you know, I'm mildly satisfied, they say a 3, the reason why they say I'm mildly satisfied, you know, it's rarely that someone says, oh my God, this place was horrible. You almost feel bad saying it. Every so often you do that, but 6 out of 7 times, even though you thought you would never go back to this restaurant ever again, you'd say, yeah, it's okay, it's a 3, it's average. But you're really telling yourself, I'm never going back. Basically, if it's not a 4.5 or a 5, you don't have satisfaction scores high enough. Even a 4 is probably not high enough. Let's get to our second article. Because, okay, let me hit pause because I don't have my second article here. Hold on 1 second. Let me hit pause. Pause. Okay, sorry. The one number you need to grow. This is an article by Frederick Reichheld. And if you notice, if you go back to this article, the 1990 article that was referenced a couple pages in that I brought up earlier, was also written by this guy. So, that story that I was telling you that in the 80s and in the early 90s, people were getting upset with how satisfaction scores were not correlated, to growth. So here is a consulting firm that did a significant amount of research, that we have saying right here at the bottom of the article. That's because their results don't correlate tightly with profits or growth. Satisfaction results don't correlate properly with profits or growth, but loyalty does. Another very interesting component to this article, or nugget, you could say, on page 48, right-hand side over here, this concept of the leaky bucket. When you think about customers, you always have some customers, we talk about a customer funnel. We always have customers coming in at the top as new customers, and hopefully they become clients. Sometimes they defect, or they switch, or they pass away, or somehow or another you lose them as a customer. The function is how quickly are you losing customers? And more importantly, do we have this? It's actually not in this article, but the ratio between new customers coming in and customers leaving is called churn. And the higher your churn, the worse off you are. So think about a cable company, say like Comcast, for instance. People move all the time. People leave their apartments. People buy a new house. So someone disconnects their cable service. Some people get rid of their cable service altogether and just go web only. But how many new customers is Comcast picking up versus how much are they losing? Is it a negative or a positive number? I.e., are they losing more people than they're gaining? Then your churn rate is not a very good churn rate. Okay. Let me read something to you on page 49, right here. Bottom left-hand corner of the page. Even less reliable means of gauging loyalty through conversational customer satisfaction measures. Our research indicates that satisfaction lacks consistent, demonstrable connection to actual customer behavior and growth. This is the idea that that I'm preaching a little bit with this week's set of readings. So on page 40, they did this data analysis. They looked at tons of questions, and this is the magic question right here in the bottom left-hand side. How likely is it that you will recommend, say Comcast, to a friend or a colleague? And this question alone correlates better with growth and loyalty than anything else. Because what happens is, if you ask someone about satisfaction, it's a past behavior. But loyalty measures are all pro-social, future-oriented behaviors. You're not looking to the past to project to the future. You're actually already projecting towards the future. You're one step ahead of where the measure was before when you were just looking at satisfaction. So by how likely would you to recommend, you may have had a good experience, but you don't know if you could recommend this to a friend or a family member. But if you had an amazing experience, then it's easy for you to recommend it. And that's why this measure is one of the best ones you could use. It's really strong. If you notice on page 51, we're over here on the left-hand side, they look at the scores again. Promoters, they called them promoters. On a scale of 1 to 10, these are 9 or 10s. Right? The passively satisfied logged an 8 or a 7, and detractors logged anywhere from a 6 to a 0. You see, loyalty measurements are also skewed. And basically, if it's not a 9 or a 10 in the net promoter score, you're probably going to have a problem. You're probably going to have a problem. On page 52, we have some nice examples there with airlines, internet service providers. Any of you guys remember Earthlink? Car rental services. And then on 53 and 53, we have a primer for getting that Net Promoter Score. Okay? So here we are. Satisfaction, loyalty. Loyalty is better. Satisfaction is not enough. And know that they're skewed. Our next article. When every customer is a new customer. Here's the twist. I mean, we were just talking about churn, which is actually, this is the article where it's defined very well on page 30, customer churn. Yeah, there are some businesses where every customer is new or newer. You know, it's much harder to deal with loyalty here. Again, we have on the bottom of this, we have the concept of the leaky bucket on the first page. Our next concept that was very good, and I make sure I brought it up in the last article, but it's highlighted here even better, is churn. It's fantastic. It's a measurement that I want you to have in your brain. So there are some nice tips on the back end of this, you know, and I have no idea whether the business you're in primarily deals with, you know, the business that you're working for, your company, whether this is helpful or not. But this is the only article I've ever seen that talked about new customer and new customer only when you have extremely high churn. Alumni networks, fantastic nugget. You know, a way to migrate them from one to the other, from product line to product line. Very good. Okay, we have article number 4 here. Customer loyalty isn't enough. Grow your share of wallet. So we introduced you to the loyalty concept. We introduced you to the Net Promoter Score. And here we have a couple of professors and some consultants that are trying to say that we could even take this one step further. We want share of wallet, meaning we want a large percentage of your X spending for a particular category. You know, I have friends that used to work at Walgreens at corporate in their digital department. And they knew if they got someone to start doing their prescriptions with them early enough in their lives, there's some intimacy when it comes down to medications that if you always go to the same pharmacy to pick up your subscriptions, you tend to become so loyal that that's the only place you'll go. You know, there isn't very much, you know, think about your own habits. My family happens to go to CVS. We only go to CVS. We never go anywhere else other than CVS. Wouldn't walk in Walgreens unless we were forced to. You know, that's where we get our prescriptions. It's where we have our loyalty card data. We don't even think about it. We see a circular for Walgreens and we recycle it. You know, this is where this concept of share of wallet. CVS is trying to get more purchases out of us, and stuff that we might buy at Target or we might buy at other stores. They're giving coupons for us to buy it in CVS because we're already going to CVS to pick up our prescriptions. So CVS is trying to get a larger share of wallet from us. It's a very neat concept. Fantastic for your nugget journals. Okay? Here we go. Last article, microblogging. Now, in our Web 2.0 module of last week, we were talking about blogging. So these are the platforms such as WordPress and Blogger. These tend to be long-form articles. You know, these tend to be paragraphs. These tend to be closer to a magazine or a newspaper type article than not, just in digital form. A microblog, also known as Twitter, tends to be more about immediacy. It tends to be much shorter. In Twitter's case, we're talking about characters. We're talking about 140 characters. But microblogging, I'm also going to talk about Tumblr in this category. I'm also going to talk about Storyfy, which is another one in this category. And then we have our newer ones, I'm going to talk about Vine, which is these 6-minute YouTube videos. If you think about YouTube as a video blog, long form, 5 to 10 minutes, you can think about Vine as a micro blog video, 6 seconds. You know? And the biggest difference social media wise, if you look at Facebook and you look at Twitter, if you look at WordPress and you look at Twitter, if you look at Blogger and you look at Tumblr, these are all about immediacy, i.e. a microblog is about immediacy. You know, Twitter is almost the mind's hive of the moment. It really, things do not last on Twitter. Think about your own Twitter feed. If you don't see it while you're looking at it, chances are you're not going to see it. And you're never going to, it's not like email where you're going to go back and search all your old feed. You might go back an hour or two, you might scroll a little bit, but you're not going back until the morning when it's the middle, you know, when it's late evening to see, oh, let's see what my entire feed was doing today. No. So when you start thinking about, and we're going to talk about social media strategy all semester, you have to think about temporal and time and what you would like to accomplish. There are some things that Facebook and blogs and social networks are better for. People are sitting down, you have more of a movie mentality. You sit down to watch a movie. You sit down to get some information. I'm going to call Twitter the movie trailer. Because what happens is the tweet acts like a movie trailer to take you to some movie somewhere else. Whether it's to a blog, whether it's to Facebook, whether it's to a LinkedIn something. It's sort of like, I call Twitter like the traffic cop. It just drives traffic in all different directions. Related to this, and although I wouldn't call it a microblog, Pinterest is also very good at being a traffic cop. Where people start at Pinterest, get all these little movie trailer links, and go somewhere else. Let me see if there's anything else really interesting in here. 9 things you should know about microblogging. Ambient awareness. You know, that's fine. Push versus pull. Is there anything else in here that's really mind-blowing that I wanted to get to? You notice on page 109, we look down here in the bottom right-hand corner and look what's there. Reichheld, 2003. That's what we're reading. Relevance, respect. There are some neat Twitter tools if you're a Twitter fan. On page 111, this Twitalizer is a very neat thing, and TweetBeep is a very neat thing. And there was another one earlier in the article. Another Twitter tool. Twitterholic on page 108, halfway through down on the right-hand page. These are all nice little apps to be able to do things that you want to do with Twitter. Okay? So that's really what I wanted to blurt out with the articles. I'm going to take a breather. I'm going to let you guys take a breather, and I'm going to come back with your questions in a different video. Okay? Thank you very much.